Good to see. How many people are here? Only a few. Let's see how many more turn up in that regard. Anyway, it's been another busy week. At least I got a few stuff out. I didn't get everything that I wanted to, but I am, based on requests that people have made, I still have a bit of a backlog on requests. So I did sneak one of my protein ones in, the leucine one, because to try and get that in, I did say, but trying to get some of the other comprehensively done, like the choline one. I had a few different sort of iterations on that, and a few other things. There's a few others. If I've forgotten, if in the next couple of weeks I haven't actually responded to people's sort of requests for a video of a specific item or whatever, g'day Shell, then just remind me, because there's just too many things to keep track of, so it's easy if people just remind me and say, oops, and then I can respond appropriately. Makes it easier. Yes. But otherwise, it's yeah, I'm okay, sure. Yeah, I'm okay. A bit on the lonely side, But yes, lockdowns and all that sort of stuff, and closures, and not being able to communicate sometimes with the people you love, or have close contact, are always an issue. Australia's a bit crazy in this regard. There's a few people in Sydney and Melbourne that have basically got out and protested and said enough is enough, and I do support that. I don't encourage violence or misbehaviour by anyone in that regard. That's not on. But a peaceful protest, yep, I support that. G'day, Lucky. Yeah, I'm fine in that regard. The mainland is, so it does have an effect on us, because it means that Tassie basically gets sealed off as well, from any contact beyond our state borders. So we don't have any lockdowns inside the state yet. But yeah, we'll see how it plays out. Yeah, New South Wales and Victoria and a few others. It's just the whole purpose of, the World Health Organization doesn't endorse even these. Even this is just lunacy. This is just bureaucrats and politicians gone mad. G'day, mate. Good to see you here, Dearbox. And Figo HD. Good to, yep. Yes. I think they're all right. It's sort of a mad situation that we're going through at the moment in Australia, and the problem is even the federal government. I mean, they're up to their eyeballs in debt, so they're basically saying to the states now, "Oh, you guys need to contribute." Well, I mean, you can't have a situation where either you basically lock the country down completely until you vaccinate everyone, if that's your goal, if that's your ideology, okay? I basically don't believe in all this. I basically just believe telling people to take vitamin D and let the virus just run its course like the flu does and everything else. That's my view. But obviously I'm not going to be heard. But if people that believe in basically that this is more than the flu, way worse, even though none of the evidence shows that. But anyway, let's say even if they believe this sort of stuff, why are they allowing people to come in via boats and planes? It's a simple question. The high transmission rate that is coming into the country is coming from that. They could have quite easily said, if you don't want to, if from the beginning, rather than our, Prime Minister being in Hawaii on holidays and gallivanting around the place, if he had basically said, okay, under the Constitution, the Australian Constitution, just for the people in North America and all that, it is the federal government, that is the central government, not the states, that are responsible for quarantining purposes and any lockdowns or whatever. So if they had basically, at that time, basically sealed off the Australian borders, said no aircraft, foreign or domestic, will fly in or out of the country. And they would they would declare certain zones in Australia, like in remote areas or in places like Christmas Island or whatever, as quarantine centres. Anybody coming in would have to be quarantined, and anybody, and then be allowed in the general population. There would be zero lockdowns. The national economy wouldn't have to be locked down at all. We would have basically done an initial lockdown right at the beginning. We would have wiped out the initial strain of the A version, and pretty much there would have been no more. That would have been it. There would be no more transmissions, because basically people would have been quarantined in these centres and then only then be allowed after a month to come back to the mainland. So there would be no transmission possible. So you'd have them in one quarantine centre for 14 days, then you'd shift them to the other one, and it basically, if they showed no signs after basically another 14 days, that's a month, you allow them in the country. You don't have to close down the economy. You don't have to basically, provide. You don't have to go into debt. Not only that, look at the other advantage. All the airlines wouldn't be affected. Because one, you don't have a competition from overseas, so no overseas, because large parts of our population actually travel abroad when on holidays. There's only a proportion of Australians that go do domestic travel for holidays, and a proportion of overseas people that come for domestic holidays, because it's cheaper to go to Asia. Let's just be blunt about it. That's the truth. And it's close by. It's only a couple of hours. It's as close as the northern part of Australia. So why wouldn't you go just an extra hour or two to another destination, which is a hell of a lot cheaper? That's why a lot of Australians, and a lot of those overseas trips were basically done by a lot of our carriers, but also by overseas carriers. So if you then have the domestic travel going up because you don't have anything coming in, you can leave the border, all the internal borders between the states open. You've got no issues. People can move around and all that. And also you don't have foreign workers coming in either. You know what that does? That drives your unemployment down to about 3% or even less, because a lot of the people are staying domestically, going on holidays domestically. And so there's going to be a high demand for domestic work. So automatically Australia basically would have been in a boom time. Absolute boom time, very low unemployment, boom time, and the economy would have been really chugging along without any requirement for JobKeeper or any all these things that are going to indebt the young generation and the grandchildren coming for many decades because of the this craziness that we had. And we wouldn't have to have all the stupid politics about COVID. People would have come in to quarantine centres and then in the country, and then when you basically vaccinated everyone with whatever vaccine they wanted, then basically, or the majority of the population, then basically it'd be all over. You'd open up the borders and everything. So that's according to their plan. I believe in the vitamin D approach and all that, but they're not going to listen to me. So just based on their logic, their stupid logic, the best approach would have been to basically, quarantine. That's what they should have done. So that's the way I would do it. Simple as that. So there's, this sort of bullshit that, if you're within their guidelines, the way they do it. But this constant situation where they're constantly bringing in people, and then you've got these poor people that are working in hotels, and hotels don't have very good, filtration. So they don't have filtering systems. So Air circulates in a hotel, so will the viruses. Let's be honest about this. It's bullshit quarantine. And then they wonder why we're constantly getting these reinfections in the community. Because basically, you're bringing in people into the two most populated cities in Australia, Sydney and Melbourne, which are, well over 5 million people live in those cities. And then you expect not to have a problem? I mean, how fucking stupid can you be? These people are just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And you've got the federal government that's basically handed over responsibility to the states deliberately, so it doesn't cost them much, and also politically it doesn't cost them. So they can go and say in the future, oh, it wasn't our fault, it was the states that did mismanage the quarantines. What a bunch of wankers they are, politicians. And then they use those infections as arguments to shut down and control the population and all that. That's what's really about this whole agenda. If you look at it, it's just really dodgy as dog shit when there are other options like ivermectin, vitamin D, and other things. But the reality is, if they really believed in proper quarantining and preventing transmission and keeping the cost of the community down in terms of debt levels, that you had JobKeeper, payments to support people, if they really believed about good management of the economy and good prevention of people coming in and transmitting within the population, they would properly close the borders. We're an island continent. It's very hard to get here. And most of the remote Australia in the north is basically, there's only soldiers there, there's small population centres, and it's basically, crocodile infested, and it's basically remote. So you're not going to get very far by coming in by boat or anything. The majority of people that do come in are usually people that are involved in illegal sort of drugs and whatever else. But the majority of people that are going to come through are going to come by aeroplane or ship to the major cities. So it's just bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. If they really wanted to manage it the way they're talking about, we want to prevent the spread, well, fucking create quarantine centres and don't bring those people in. And you wouldn't have a spread at all, until you're vaccinated according to your own dogma. So even their logic, they're against their own logic. Because, maybe they're running another agenda. It's plausible. I'm not saying that they are. I just think they're just mismanagers. They're just complete fucking incompetence. They don't know what they fucking do. They're basically like typical politicians who basically are just reactive and nothing else. That's all they are. They're fucking just reactive idiots. Absolutely idiots. Nothing else beyond that. My personal view is, I would have, if I was Prime Minister, I'd give everybody vitamin D supplementation, cost far less than all these job payments and all that sort of stuff, and get people out there working in the community and actually producing wealth for the country. Not this sort of fucking bullshit that goes, These people are the responsible, and we should call them out because they said they know what they're doing. Well, they don't. If they do, if their experts fucking knew what they were doing, they wouldn't basically be recommending the bullshit that they've recommended and backflipping continuously because they can't make up their fucking mind because they don't know how to cover their asses. When somebody backflips continuously, they're going, maybe I should say this, muddle the waters, because the more you muddle the waters, the more you cover your ass. That's what politicians typically do. They double talk, and so do these experts. They double talk. A lot of them are, political appointees, let's not forget. They double talk and talk shit because that's how they confuse people. So you can't point the blame at a specific person. And the first person that they will actually blame will always be some poor public servant at the lower end rather than the politician. They'll point that, that person didn't do the right thing. No, you basically didn't manage the situation because the rot starts at the head. It doesn't start at the bottom. So, yes, fucking assholes. Idiot politicians. What can one say? Anyway, I need to go back and find where I was because I accidentally rolled the actual mouse thing. Oh, well. Shit. shit happens. Sounds great. Yes. Nothing like raw milk. Yummy. And I've been absent for the last 3 weeks. Lost my, 44-year-old brother-in-law, stage 4 melanoma. Oh, shit. Had to drive through the east coast of Florida for his service today. We had a huge auction, crazy. Yeah, unfortunate. My condolences, Shell. Yeah, it's a bit unfortunate. Yeah. Once that melanoma really gets going, it can be a problem. This is the problem with seed oils, Too much seed oils being incorporated in people's poor diet and become vulnerable to this sort of damaging effect from UV. It's not the UV's fault. It's basically, and a lack of also niacin. Niacin is UV protective. So pork, really good source of niacin, is very much UV protective. So, yeah, but unfortunately, most people avoid a lot of those species appropriate foods nowadays and eat oils and refined sugars. Yeah, look, my condolences for you and your family. It's an unfortunate situation, that's really young. God, that's the same age I had my cardiovascular issue. Yeah, I mean, the amount of garbage I consumed in terms of seed oils and stuff like that. I used to burn very quickly as well. So I was very vulnerable and all that. I used to have all these little spots all over my face and body. So, yeah, took a while for that stuff to clear up. The eye trouble. Yeah, look, there's going to be a lot of people because of, circumstances, economic and all that are basically, there already has been, numbers, they've sort of said, oh, it's not COVID related. Bullshit. But anyway, yeah. And it will increase because as people lose their livelihoods and lose, people have in some cases worked for decades, building their business, building their lives and all that. And they've just seen it literally pulled to pieces, basically to save a couple of old people who've got comorbidities and all that. Not that they shouldn't be saved. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that they could have been basically protected with ivermectin and vitamin D. If the researchers really looked at the real good literature rather than some of the bullshit stuff that the pharmaceutical companies put forward for them so they can promote their own wares, yeah. So, but that wasn't the case. And other approaches could have been taken to basically protect those people. But a lot of those people would have died anyway. If they don't die this year, they'll die next year from the flu. A lot of those people are vulnerable. They die every year from flu and all that. The average age was about 80 odd. It usually happens because of vitamin D deficiency. That's the main thing. If you want to keep those people, older people alive, fucking give them vitamin D. That's the best thing you can do. Because if COVID doesn't get them, the flu does every year. Different groups, which are old and got comorbidities. At the end of the day, we're all going to die, But now we've destroyed a whole lot of other people's lives that still are young and still have had a future. Hate to say it, but when people here in Canada, you're saying we should follow Australian New Zealand model for the last 6 months, I was saying just wait until their winter now. Yep, exactly. Well, the problem is we're still allowing people to come through the airports. I mean, and the new strain, the Delta strain, is more virulent. It transmits much easier. it was about to mutate. It was going to mutate. All viruses eventually, if they can't transmit very easily, eventually they mutate to be able to transmit much easier. It's just the way it is. It will go through certain mutations. The only reason the COVID types take so long, like COVID 1, SARS 1 as it was called, and this SARS 2, they are not as mutagenic. That means they don't mutate as quick as the flu. They are much slower. So it's taken a very long time for, probably 2 years before we saw this quite different mutation. So it's taken, and the more people it's in, the more easy it can mutate. But, it's the way it is. G'day, Jared.
Hey, Harry.
Or the Canadian, where the government's racing after him to jab him.
Yep. Sending us helpful little flyers in the mail about why you should get vaccinated.
RNA, mate. You don't want autism? Or, some not autism, some autoimmune disease?
I was going to say, Harry, that's not like you. I thought you said that that was disproven. No, I have enough autoimmune
that was
symptoms
the
when I'm not careful. Right.
So basically, your government is guaranteed to give you some autoimmune situation potentially. Potentially? We're only saying potentially, YouTube here. Potential risk. There is a potential risk because it is in the literature. We know with mRNA type oncology usage basically had autoimmune manifestations in quite a few people. It's the reason why they didn't work, first of all, in dealing with cancer. And we know because it's a metabolic problem. It's driven by the crap you eat. But at the same time, it created autoimmunity in quite a few people. So we'll see what happens with the people that have had the Pfizer and the Moderna and all these mRNA ones in future. Down the track in the next couple of 5 years odd. There's already some people already showing signs of basically what they call long COVID syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
So we're already
from the
seeing
vaccine,
people
from the vaccine,
the mRNA ones. But there are mitigation strategies some doctors have worked out. That's basically our old friend ivermectin, vitamin D, those sort of things. Vitamin D because it's a regulator of the immune system. Ivermectin because it can actually deal with some of these conditions which are related to viral or pathogenic sort of misbehaviors. So they seem to suppress these things quite severely. So we don't really understand some of the mechanisms, but it seems to be working. As far as anecdotes go with the people that they've been treating with long COVID, that means, and a lot of these people weren't people that actually had the vaccine, but actually had COVID itself and ended up with long COVID.
Well, the government told me that the vaccines are safe, period. There was no conjecture. There was no
need for
there's no need for additional information for informed consent. It's just that simple. It's one word. They are safe. And if you're concerned about their not being any long-term data, then they'll just say, oh, well, they've already been administered to hundreds of millions of people. Hundreds of millions of people can't be wrong.
Well, this is the answer that I usually give to people when they ask me this, because I've been asked, and I go, well, why do you think they actually test vaccines for 5 to 7 years? Is it just for fun? Why don't they just do it for 1 year and then just basically mass vaccinate everyone?
I'm going to guess that it's not coincidence that that's how long it takes your cells to turn over.
Exactly. And it basically, if you're going to actually see any issues, you're going to see it within the 7 to 5 to 7 years. That is why they basically require much longer, guinea pig types, studies where they actually assess people to make sure that there is no side effects, and also to pick up specific groups which have specific genetics. So if they see, for instance, in a specific group, a certain issue, they'll check genetics immediately. And if they've got certain common genetics, they'll run them through a genome sequencer. And if they have the same, they'll say, okay, these specific people with these genetics, which may be a rare condition, have a more tendency of being, they should not be taking this vaccine. So they can actually then make proper recommendations for specific groups and the general community. That's why we have the 5 to 7 year protocols. They're not accidental. They're there specifically for safety purposes. That's why they were created. What we've done is fast-tracked. That means we've basically said that the virus is way worse than the possible side effects, and we are basically, and if you hear even the propaganda that they're putting out, that they say, well, it's worse, and for some people it may be. Getting COVID may be worse than basically taking the vaccine in terms of outcomes for some people. That's true as well, but it's going to vary within the population. But it hasn't gone through the 5 to 7 years. And then the other thing is, with things like ivermectin, you can reduce the severity. And with vitamin D, you can possibly, you can, with good high doses, that is, at least around the 10,000 IU mark, you can eliminate the problem. That means you can strengthen your immune system sufficiently to deal with the problem. So you don't end up with long COVID issues. Whether you get COVID, it won't be an issue. It's only an issue in people
natural immunity, herd immunity. Talk to me, Harry. That's
exactly.
That's a conspiracy theory.
Yes, it is.
Herd immunity can't be achieved without vaccinating everyone. That's what herd immunity means.
Yes, what a load of bullshit. The reality is, this is another reason why we don't, amongst the tribal populations in Africa, like Mary Ruddock, remember she was talking about how she had only noticed COVID in the cities rather than actually in the rural areas where people were out in the sun continuously, hunting or gathering or involved in sort of herding type activities. Nothing there. And we even noticed that as well in some US and also European areas, like rural areas where people were outdoors working for longer periods of time. But even in those areas, we did notice an increase in the winter, again, because vitamin D levels decline. That's another problem if you're away from the tropics, if you're not within the tropics. And the only areas of the world where we've seen high death rates are in places like Indonesia, Malaysia, these sort of places which is Muslim and people cover. So there are, and because somebody with a darker skin needs to be out in the sun at least 5 hours to get enough vitamin D, the consequence of that is that if you're living in those areas and you're covering and you're not, and you're working in an office in particular, a lot of them, now like Indonesia, 80. We've got in the past, there was about back in 2006. I remember sending an email to my brother Sean, and I actually said that that basically things look like there's going to be an explosion of the middle classes in Southeast Asia, which was and it was also what I was saying, also that there was this is before the GFC as well, and I had actually said that that it's coming as well. So that was yes, my brother. He actually went back and found the actual email, and I go, yeah, exactly. Okay, you got it right. Fuck off. I got a response, but what I was going to say is that I told them that it would increase, and then within a sort of a decade after that, the middle classes went from about 2 odd million within a population of 200 million up to 80. So a lot of these people ended up working either in factories or in the cities, in factories or in offices. So what happens when nearly half of your population is no longer in rural areas in the sun and they're darker skinned? And some idiots from the West are recommending to put sunscreen on. which people in cities are more likely to basically put on than people in rural areas. You know, it's a perfect storm. This is why we've seen this explosion. The same things happen in India. There's also some cultural things where people don't want to have lighter skin as well, so they avoid the sun and put sunscreen on and do things like that and stay indoors.
Well,
so, I mean, even my partner, she's bad like that. She will actually, if it's very sunny, will actually go out with an umbrella. It's ridiculous. I just joke and laugh with her, how idiotic it looks. And she goes, "Don't be like that." Oh, God. So, yeah, it is a cultural thing, unfortunately, but it does make them susceptible.
Right. Yeah, even in India, the survival rate is still, what, 99.97% or something, or it might be, I think it's a quarter percentage risk of dying.
G'day, Lukey. I just want to get a comment in. So, did you finish your anal sunbaking? I know Shell's really into that sort of stuff, and Zombie as well up in Queensland. Get any today, mate, or not?
Jeez, I'm gone for a couple months, and already it's just immediate degeneracy.
Oh, what do you expect? I'm on the damn thing. We've got to amuse these other degenerates that are actually watching us. And I'm going to get hate mail for that comment. You were saying about India.
Oh, is that Luke bragging about his milk? I'm currently without raw milk for the next month or so.
So actually, we've been getting frost over here. It's been unusually cold. So the milk I had, it wasn't as creamy as it could be,
Lukey, you're deluded. You're deluded. There's global warming. It's warm. It's not cold. You're deluded.
Right. It's warm, yeah.
And if it's not global warming, it's still probably because of all the cows in Brazil.
That's exactly right.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. That's why you're doing your part to get rid of them and drink all of their milk, right? For the environment.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, you milk rapist.
Rape-based beverage. My favorite.
Make a sticker and put it on the car.
No. No.
I love rape-based beverage.
Oh, no.
That is bound to get some reactions.
Bloody hell, it will. Comments like that. Especially in woke countries.
I wince a little bit at that term just from these videos, but let alone parading it around in your car, I don't know.
It should be a parody because usually I've seen this a lot. Like vegan people, they walk around with like some, maybe they'll stick it to their notebooks or their car, something like, "There's a cow," and she's like, "I'm not your mom," and then then I just make the complete opposite.
Yeah, look, it's a crazy world. Believe me, it's just really weird some of the stuff that vegans are saying out there and doing. I need to just shift my dialogue box so I can actually see what people are saying.
Yeah, I had an appointment with a cardiologist last week, and I told you a little bit about this area, but for everyone else's entertainment, he does not believe that cholesterol can be shifted by more than 20% by diet, which looks pretty foolish in the face of the work of people like Dave Feldman.
Exactly.
He's an authority. And he did say that, a vegan diet might shift it by about 20% for that reason, and the reason diet will only shift it 20% is because 80% is manufactured by your liver. Yeah. He wasn't saying that I should do a vegan diet, but he was just giving it as an example of one that he believes will lower cholesterol. And it was, I even explained to him that, I'm not convinced that a lower number is a good thing. But he just gave me the same song and dance that he gives to everybody. He basically said that
Yeah,
that's what he was doing too.
it's sort of the standard sort of stuff that they actually, argue out there continuously. It's weird. It's that they have this continuous sort of I don't know. It's just one of those weird arguments that continually gets peddled. If you say something, if you tell a lie for long enough, you're eventually going to convince a certain amount of people that it's true.
Well, he at least
and that's what they have done.
He at least conceded that it's associative risk that he's warning me about, and that it's risk management, not outcomes management. But yeah, no, he still tried to make the equivocation that it's like if you have high blood sugar for a long time, it can get out of control as it does cumulative damage, and high cholesterol is the same way.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, centenarians usually run a higher cholesterol than basically, many other people.
I also had to point out to
him
also
high LP(a) as well, which I always have considered protective.
I also had to point out to him that the inflammation markers on the blood work that he was looking at were like rock bottom. So, and my blood pressure was normal. So
exactly.
He's literally just looking at one-dimensional. Just this number where I'm supposed to look is not in the range that I'm supposed to see it in. Therefore, statin.
Your genes.
That's the depth of the thinking, and also the informed consent for the patient.
I mean, genes determine where. I mean, I was basically a 5% anomaly because I didn't have high cholesterol, but I still was, and I don't generally generate high cholesterol. It's just genetic, just the way it is.
Yeah. Well, again, it's impossible for my cholesterol to be high because, it's impossible for my blood cholesterol to be high immediately after shifting diet because of the diet, according to him. But there are plenty of good therapies that we can administer because it's clearly just a genetic mutation that I've experienced that suddenly put my cholesterol high and has.
Well, this is the funny thing is, if they were concerned about increasing somebody's clearance rate, they would be wanting people to eat a diet much higher in niacin, because niacin basically increases HDL naturally, where nothing else does. Nothing else does. All the drugs that they tried before were a failure, a flop, but niacin does. But that would mean to basically recommend pork, wouldn't it?
That's true.
The highest source of niacin.
That's not kosher. That's not kosher. Have you heard of this mRNA-based? They called it a biogenic therapy. That you take an injection, you administer yourself into your liver every 2 weeks, and it lowers your cholesterol by 50%.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah,
I had not heard of that. I was just like staring like slack-jawed at this guy that he had suggested this, and with like a straight face that he's saying that this sounds like a healthy intervention that I should consider.
Yeah. Exactly. This is just crazy. It's sort of a more recent newer therapy. I mean, they've went from statins to, which have, when you look at the literature, they're a complete failure, because whether somebody's on statins or not, that it makes no difference. If somebody's on a poor diet, they will end up having the problem, because the absolute difference is 1%. It's even in small print on their preparations.
Right.
This 38%. That Lipitor says 38% is bullshit, because when you look at their small print, they say an absolute difference of 1%.
Right.
Which is basically statistical noise. It's irrelevant.
And they report the risk for preventing secondary events as well, which is slightly elevated.
Yeah, but that's because of the anti-inflammatory effect. That's the only thing. But it makes no difference. At the end of the day, in terms of all-cause mortality, there's no difference. And some studies have actually shown with statins, it actually goes up. So, and the LA veteran study actually showed after 7 years an increase in cancer. Again, because of some mitochondrial poison.
I wish
and that's why nobody does any. That was the only study that was a 7-year long study. Nobody does long-term statin studies. You won't find any beyond the LA Veterans Study. That was a government-run study by the Veterans veterans organizations in the US. The military that basically did that.
Infer the efficacy or lack thereof of statins by looking at the metrics that they're supposed to control, regardless of whether statins have been administered. So by looking at low and high cholesterol groups.
Yep,
which doesn't at all control for the impact that the statin itself is having on the individual.
Exactly. They're not looking at all the actual side effects. And, cancer is a big one. It's been growing at a rapid rate in the world. And the last thing you want to be doing is giving medication that actually increases the likelihood of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we've only got one study. And do you think they're going to do another study, long-term, like a 10-year interventional study to basically prove that it does definitely increase cancer rates? Not, because that would basically one study. People can argue, it's they can argue for confoundings, but multiple studies can confirm something, but they won't do them because they know that there is a risk there, so they're not going to basically do them because it's too profitable. I mean, remember these companies have been making shitloads of money from thalidomide in the past and all sorts of other things. They don't give a shit. And they don't really, and this is the other thing, vaccines don't really make them a lot of money. They don't actually like doing vaccines. That's why they moved out of vaccines and antibiotics. That's why we're so behind on antibiotic research, because it's not profitable. It's too cheap.
Make them more money than
they do.
Vaccines. And
that's true.
The comparative margin on it is quite a lot. Actually, I think they make 3 or 4 times more per.
That's why they moved to that technology. Yeah. Well, that's why they used it in cancer oncology. It was a big money earner in oncology until it was proven a complete and utter failure of not really helping or saving people. And, a lot of insurance companies.
Just because there have been no large-scale human trials for long-term outcomes on mRNA technologies administered to humans, and just because all of the animal models that have been done for these things were catastrophic failures, doesn't mean that hundreds of millions of people shouldn't take this and assume it's safe. There, you see, I just saved
What's
your
wrong with them?
YouTube.
Exactly. Did you hear that, YouTuber?
Yeah. I wish the cardiologist that I'd seen had been more interested in a discussion, but he was.
I better just quickly answer this question, and then we'll move on because there's more vaccines sort of stuff. Salicylic acid, that's fine. It causes apoptosis and all that. I think I've talked about it in the actual and curcumin. The only problem with curcumin, which is in, is it's a chelator of iron. That's the only problem. If you're going to have it like in sort of because of cancer reasons, in a warm type preparation, have it on an empty stomach, basically. And if you want to actually have better activation of it, put a bit of cream in there, because fat seems to actually get a better result. So from these sort of things, it's like Phycetin. It seems to get more bioavailable with fat because it binds to fat. So that's one way of putting it in, but don't have it with other, like a meal, your main meal with which is iron rich, because you want to get iron, heme iron. So you don't want to chelate it. That's the only thing I'd say about that. In that regard. And this is only for people that are basically active cancers or dealing with certain things of that sort that require these sort of things. The rest of us, don't have to worry about this. So this is just for Devox's situation, not for anyone else. Anyway, I do have a few more things to say about cancer and all that. I've got another video coming up. I'm going to try and get it out next week. I didn't get a chance to I did the leucine one. I hope people enjoyed that. If they haven't gone and seen it, what the fuck haven't you? And I'm still to do the other protein one about blood sugar. I still haven't, I'll try to get it in next week. I've got a couple of other requests that I'm trying to get in as well. So everything's delayed. It's a shutdown. No, it's not. It's just basically me. Too many things to do and not enough time. Shit happens. It's the way it is. Yes. Shell, how can you... Oh, what is wrong with you? The experts know best.
Yes, no, that was a very obvious narrative that was going to be constructed or manufactured. How else do you vilify another group best than by making them the source of everything that everyone else needs to be afraid of, as they're told, right?
Yes, what they call the new vaccine apartheid. Yes.
Mm-hmm. But if you bring up the Nazis in a debate, you lose. That's a good rule.
That's the other thing. The other thing that I heard recently, people saying that you can actually. People have been saying that like people say, I identify as masked. Actually, somebody said that to a person at an entrance, a security guard. I identify as masked, and the person didn't know what to say to them. They let them through. And there was a T-shirt. Apparently, somebody made a T-shirt saying, "I identified as vaccinated."
That's it. Vaxkin or something. It's a gender identity now, right?
Yeah, bugger them. If they're going to play those sort of games, those woke games, let's play along. Let's really, because as I said,
a game. Harry, lives are at stake.
These are double-edged swords. Let's just whack them back in their direction. Oh yes, also true, Jared. Oh, thank you for keeping me on the straight and narrow.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I know that you've been locked down in Australia, and I couldn't believe you saying that you were getting tired of it, because I did look up the mortality rate in Australia according to the updated numbers from Johns Hopkins, and I believe it's 3 something deaths per 100,000 population attributed to COVID. Did you know that that's only a 99.996% survival rate?
Yep.
Think of the 0.004. Think of the 0.004.
Yes. What a bigot I am. I know. I do apologise for that 0.000 whatever for
0.004. Yeah.
Yes, I do apologise to them for being a bigot.
That's the percentage of the Australian population so far that has died from COVID, and that's not even accounting for the.
What was the initial recommendation from the World Health Organization? The original recommendation was to have limited lockdowns, to limit not to close down the economies, to limit too many people hitting the ICUs at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, to limit the amount of people ending up in ICU. That was the whole purpose. Once that wasn't happening, what was then the purpose?
Well, I can think of one purpose for sure. It starts with a C and ends in untroll.
Yes. Precisely.
Jared is on fire today.
Thanks, Luke. The narrative about not overwhelming the hospitals is quite amusing to me, because there was
look I'll say one thing in regards
it's a noble
days. It was a legitimate thing in the early days.
It's a noble goal. It's
exactly
a concern.
how bad it was.
Yeah, for sure.
But once we knew.
But then it went on for 17 months, and I haven't heard of a single hospital around here doing anything to add to capacity for healthcare, to add to hospital beds beyond these like staged field hospitals that were set up in some big cities. And I say staged, this one in particular in Toronto was seen to be basically just there for show, that there was a little tent with a bunch of beds in it that never had anybody in it. The other thing being too, that if your healthcare system can't handle an 80% occupancy rate, then what is it doing?
Well, they need to answer this, because their whole initial argument, the premise was about hospital beds. It's not for us to argue. It's not for us to, we need to be asking them that question. Wasn't that the purpose? Wasn't that what the recommendation was from the World Health Organization?
Right.
Why are you guys changing the I have not seen anywhere from the World Health Organization of any new type of, like what they're doing now with all these constant lockdowns and severe lockdowns. I've seen nothing coming out from the World Health Organization saying, on the opposite, I've seen some criticism of it. So, this is basically bureaucrats gone mad. Mm-hmm. And nobody wants to take responsibility, and they want to, because they see if there's a flare up, what happens? The media goes on a tangent. The woke media just goes crazy and goes, "Oh, there's a massive these politicians," and they go to the politicians and say, "Oh, you're responsible for this outbreak. What are you doing about it?" You know what I mean? And there's this vicious media politician cycle. Nothing to do with. It's just basically, it's taken a life of its own. It's no longer logic. It's basically this emotional, you are killing granny or you're doing this or that. It's just basically, it's like the old witch hunts.
Mm-hmm.
That's the sort of, they've fermented a new age witch hunt against people that are basically saying, well, hold on, this is just nonsense.
I mentioned
we're the witches, mate. We're the witches.
I mentioned the frustration.
Where's your broom, Garrett? Where's your broom?
I mentioned the frustration about if you bring up the Nazis in a debate, then you lose or whatever. Like, you can't make comparisons, but that also means that you can't draw
cats and everything.
Legitimate parallels. And there is a very legitimate and alarming parallel right now with, creating an other group and then generating fear for the rest of the population and blaming that fear on the other group is something that we have seen before. And we know where it leads.
Exactly. Yep. Well, lamps, flu vaxxers have been tested for a very long time. The only people that shouldn't actually take them are specific groups and people that have got a sensitivity to eggs. So that's basically it. I do occasionally have a flu jab. I did have it this year. So I've got no problems with refreshing, because it's basically no different because it's an inactivated virus that they're putting out there. There's no mRNA, there's no nothing in it, there's no nanoparticles, there's nothing. It's just a traditional way. Put it in, you basically get an immune response, you get an update to the proteins your body may have not come into contact with. So it's just improving your innate immunity for future years. That's how I see it anyway. I still keep up the vitamin D because if I do get the flu, I may get a strain that I'm not covered for. Having some proteins that may be in that will basically lower the severity because there may be some mild immune response against some of the proteins of the new strain that comes out. Plus the vitamin D will cover me. I'm just basically, if it's safe, and I know it's been tested for a very long time because it went through those long trial periods, and they've worked out what issues exist for different population groups. They don't recommend it for people that have got issues with eggs and stuff like that. Then it's a fine thing. But this new stuff isn't. This new stuff basically has not been tested for 5 to 7 years. This new stuff is all experimental.
Get my immunity the old-fashioned way, if you want to look at it like that, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, look, I've got no problems. I say to people, if you want to basically get the flu and have high vitamin D, that's fine. Do it. I don't have an issue with that with people in that regard. I just liked personally for my own. I vaccinate for a lot of things, and I have no issues with vaccinations. Never have. As long as I've thoroughly gone back and checked the literature. I've just don't. There are some vaccines that I won't take, and that's just because there is issues with, and they are for certain severe ailments and stuff like that. And the likelihood that I'm ever going to come in contact with something like that, unlikely, so don't bother, Are
there any specifically off the top of your head that you would caution against in your view?
No, I don't want to make a comment on that front.
But there's some that you personally would choose not to.
I may discuss them in future. I'll leave it at that. But I won't discuss it now. Because I know that I'll end up getting severely trolled potentially. So I'm going to stay out of that. Sort of, I don't need the hassle. That's basically, Jared.
We do
pretty
a little
much.
trolling.
I don't need the hassle. There's always idiots out there that just want to give me a hard time. I've had a couple of that have tried to annoy me or aggravate me for their own reasons.
Luke's
this is
just
my
got
channel.
a meme idea.
At the end of the day, this is my channel, and while I have no problems with people, I'm not the sort of person that goes out there and deliberately will cancel somebody. I'm not a cancel culture type person where I'll, even if I disagree with you, I'll just say, well, I disagree with you. But, at the same time, I'm not going to sit and basically be harassed by people just because they've got a different opinion. Fine.
You don't find it tremendously meaningful to go and tattle to the mob on the internet about a bad experience that you had?
I haven't had a bad experience. Hold on. What am I doing? Trying to work out where those things are going. The attachments.
Luke is spamming chat with pictures. I'm clicking, but it's not working. Hang on, I'll just copy paste it.
Okay. Are they all different? Oh, they are different. Yep. Okay, that one. Not that one.
Raw milk and raw cream every day.
I knew you would relate.
Yes. Although I will say high quality pasteurized cream is not as bad for me as pasteurized milk. I would obviously still prefer raw cream, but at least good quality pasteurized cream doesn't. No, me neither. Not any meaningful amount. I mean, it takes like 8 liters of milk to get a liter of raw cream, right? So.
Yeah, I know it's a hassle. It's a hassle.
Yeah. Yes.
So I find the same situation as well. I believe in choline supremacy.
Yeah, I must say, Harry, you've got me eyeing a choline supplement.
Let me put it this way:
I haven't been eating eggs lately.
Lamps did make a comment, and he said, "Oh, it's not only choline's not going to save you. It's not only choline or something along those lines." And yes, it does. It's probably he's not disagreeing with me that it's positive, but he said it's the whole it's other things and all that. And as I said, the title that I used was a bit clickbaity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've got to get traffic to the damn channel. You got to, you just can't use some. So it was a bit clickbaity in that regard. But as I've always said to people, a species-appropriate diet. I mean, even leucine. Yes, you can give leucine to somebody, but at the end of the day, if you really want to have, a lot of the other amino acids also play a role. Like taurine plays a role. Like the actual entanglement of the actual in Alzheimer's. When you get those beta amyloids, they entangle because they're glycated with a lot of sugar. So obviously, if you don't have as much sugar, you're not going to create as many entanglements. A large part of the problem. So trying to give choline to somebody who's continually doing more damage may reduce the amount of damage, but you're still going to be getting damage. It's not it's not a panacea to save you. Obviously, a species-appropriate diet is the way to go because you're going to get all those nutrients in the food plus all the additional stuff, but you're not going to get all the garbage that's actually causing the problem in the first place. So we have to, the species-appropriate thing. But at the same time, as I pointed out to Lamps as well, that a lot of people for a very long period of time in their life, they may have not, like us, have been damaged for a lot of years. In those sort of cases, you've got a lot of accumulated beta amyloid and a lot of, these bad proteins in your brain. You may need higher doses to clear them out. That's the difference. But it's a short-term intervention, for a couple of years. It's like the vitamin E, 5 to 7 years to clear out, or to basically electron down to all those damaged fatty acids that have come from seed oils. It's the same sort of stuff when it comes to your liver. If you've got liver dysfunction and a lot of fibrotic tissue, you've got to take higher doses, one of taurine, to break down the fibrotic tissue, but also something like alpha lipoic acid, which heals a lot of the damage, because it's a massive electron donor. So, and the other thing is, I mean, you could say, well, I could eat certain things that basically that give a lot of that nutrition, but the problem is a lot of that goes through, the regular system, and it actually dissipates throughout all the tissue. We're giving a supplement of our alpha lipoic acid will go directly to the liver. And as a consequence, more of it will go there and more of it will electron donor. And that's what you want. Because a master electron donor, you want basically all this tissue that has basically had electrons knocked out, because that's really what this damaged tissue is. You want to electron donor massively to basically stabilize this tissue.
So would you, if someone was really trying to maximize...
the approaches you're going to be using is different depending on your situation, right? You were saying.
Well, it's just if you're really trying to maximize glutathione, would you take NAC with RALA in addition to, getting your raw food sources that have lots of it?
I actually view when it comes to, look, NAC has got a place, and a lot of the neurological sort of stuff as well. But my sort of view is that a lot of people are very, very deficient in selenium.
Mm-hmm.
And selenium is a critical element that usually is ignored when it comes to glutathione. Glutathione, you can provide a lot of the other stuff, but if you don't have enough selenium in the diet, you're not going to generate enough glutathione. Simple as that. It's really dependent on selenium. And selenium sources are things like liver, eggs, things like tuna, certain fish types and stuff like that, certain crustaceans and things like mussels and stuff like that. Certain things have and certain things don't have as good quantities. And obviously that has to be balanced with, as I've said, with iodine, but you need good levels if you're going to basically improve your glutathione status. And it's one thing that people neglect quite a bit. And it's actually been shown quite clearly in a lot of studies, as I've talked about, Polish study, 46% reduction in cancer when people had 250 micrograms of selenium, and 42% in an American study, an earlier one, when they had 200. So
yeah, I've been interested in my own glutathione status in addition to methylation ability.
Yeah, so these sort of things really, really help. Yes. Look, a species appropriate diet is going to basically protect you against winter colds. It's going to do a lot of things. That's true. An improved immune system. But vitamin D is, as I've said, sun, salt, and meat are your go-to things. Some other things that I do, that's up to people if they want to do them. I do them because I know my own. I haven't basically been on an ancestral diet from my birth, and I'm still repairing a lot of the damage and all that. And so, my body isn't as robust as I want it to be. I know that in the next decade I'll probably be there, and so I do some of these things like, flu vaxes and stuff like that. Why? To basically, so when it does hit me, it doesn't hit me as hard. And at the same time, the vitamin D will cover the other part, and any vulnerabilities that are still being improved over time. So, as I said to people, I do certain things because I used to do a much higher doses, like I used to do a 250 milligram tablet of niacin. I don't anymore. Sometimes a whole week and I do no niacin, because I eat plenty of pork and I'm getting, around about 200 just from the pork and all the other foods. And I'm going, why do I need to take a supplement? So I don't, because of high deuterium. That's the other side of things with supplements. They do have high deuterium. It's the reason why I avoid them. But that's, that's the other side to the coin in that regard. What is no one is talking about vitamin D, insulin resistance, obesity. Exactly, no one is. Not one
Well,
goddamn word.
That's the far right conspiracy of natural immunity, Shell.
Yes. Well, they've got a few other cockwomble ideas in that part of that grouping, but yeah, I know they add people like moderate people like myself with those people. I'm going no, you know, just because they're just conspiratorial about everything, but you know the rest of us, they'll jump on any conspiracy, but the rest of us basically, when it comes to these sort of things, well, show us the evidence. You guys don't have the evidence. And you haven't done the 5 to 7 year studies. You basically, there are other good research that shows vitamin D, ivermectin. There's research. If there wasn't research, then they could say, I'm conspiratorial, I'm a crackpot, I don't know what I'm saying. But when there's good research, and even has been used in medical settings around the world, in different hospitals and all that, ivermectin basically in Mexico, where they dropped the levels from 280% down to 6%, which is basically what the normal annual death rate is in those hospitals. And the same thing happened with, in Spain and a few other places where they did high doses vitamin D. None of those people ended up in ICU.
Harry,
so as far as I'm concerned,
we don't need the data. We don't need the data. Okay, it's safe. It's been studied for a whole year, and hundreds of millions of people have already taken it. If it's good enough for the government of Canada to tell all of its citizens in a formal manner, it's good enough for me.
Is your supreme leader basically monitoring your internet usage, dear Jared?
I hope so. I wouldn't want all the things I have to say about him to fall on deaf ears.
Yes. Crazy world we live in.
Yeah, well, my province where I am now, they're removing the COVID restrictions entirely next Friday. They announced yesterday, so they gave a week's notice. I'm not really sure why, and probably 2/3 of the people that I know think that it's too soon. Don't let us out of our cages too quickly.
Yeah, look.
They're not even willing to enjoy the freedom once it's offered to them again.
Exactly. Yeah. What's wrong with you? Don't you want to be in a smart city and be eating kibble and being constantly vaccinated with experimental stuff that hasn't gone through any 5 to 7 year testing regime? Why do you have to wait for 5 to 7 years, Jared? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, maybe their cells turn over every year. I don't know.
That's exactly right. I mean, there are profits to be made every year. Aging. We can't wait for 5 to 7 years just to please you, Jared.
That's true. I'm pretty much a science denier since they said trust the science and I don't trust them.
Exactly. You're a bigot. You're a science denier. You're everything. Hope your government's taking action against you.
The first, I shouldn't say the first. One of the fundamental rules of marketing and advertising is not to use the word trust.
Exactly.
Because if you have to ask for somebody's trust, then you don't deserve it.
Exactly. Precisely. As I say to people ask me, "Oh, what do you do?" I don't like telling. I say to people, "Look, when it comes to these sort of things, you need to decide yourself." And I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to stick to vitamin D. And if the only way of getting overseas is basically taking something, it's going to be Novavax. I'm hoping that maybe we get lucky and I've been looking at the new Indian one that's come out, which is, what is it? Covixin or something like that. I can't remember exactly the name. If I'm not pronouncing it right, and there's anybody from India, I do apologise. But it seems like it's done very much like on paper, very much like the traditional, like the flu vax is. that means it's not even like the Novavax. It's completely completely traditional. Like exactly like the flu vax. All the particles
that's the one
and
I
stuff.
want.
That's the only. It's identical to the way and it's gone. I think it's nearly completed the third stage trials. That would be, if I could get my hands on, that would be the only one I would basically use. That's I've sort of moved from Novavax to this one. On paper, I'm talking about. I'm still going to basically, as I said, I promised the person who asked me, I'm going to basically do a proper analysis of it, of all the context, the whole lot, cover everything. And then on paper, from my, let's say, my preliminary look at it, it looks the best. I don't know whether we can get access to it. I'm going to investigate to see whether there's going to be one, access in Australia or anywhere else other than India, and two, whether you can actually get it through the postal system. Because one good thing about it is because it's similar to the actual, like the other vaccines, it's fine, like the traditional vaccines, it's sort of fine. Even, it doesn't have to be, like cold storage, like at very low temperatures, like a lot of these new experimental ones, the mRNA type ones and all that. So it's much easier to send through the mail, so to speak. So I'm going to investigate a bit of that, and I'm just hoping that the Australian government, because they can't get a lot of the others, they may just jump on that because it's close, regional, and may be able to get that. So on paper, it's looking pretty good in the traditional way. And the other nice thing about it is, because it has the deactivated virus and all the actual proteins, not just the spike, but all the other proteins that you would get if you actually got the actual virus itself, you're probably going to get a more rounded innate immunity in that regard. So you're going to get a more complete, like you would if you got the actual virus and you got infected. So that's the nice thing about this one. From what I can see, as I said, on paper, I'm investigating it, and late next week or early the following week, I should have a video out. I'm going to try and get it out late next week, but no promises, because I do have other videos that I've promised to do. So, but it's one that's of interest to me, and because they are an English-speaking country, it may be accessible to certain English-speaking countries as well, because they do have far more contact with those countries. So that I'm sort of hoping in that regard. So that means Australia, New Zealand, Canada, countries like that will probably be, because they're part of the Commonwealth, and India is part of the Commonwealth. So I'm hoping that Commonwealth countries will basically get like prioritized by the Indian government.
Right. A better innate immunity would hopefully extend to other variants in terms of the government's recognition of your protection for booster shots and all of that BS too.
Exactly.
Assuming that they're, actually just trying to protect people, which seems like a pretty ridiculous assumption at this point to me. But have you heard about Canada's endeavor to experiment on the population with mixing and matching? That the doses are perfectly fine to get whichever one of Johnson & Johnson or AstraZeneca or Pfizer or Moderna and just mix it with another shot of any of the other ones. It's the same.
Well, I can tell you that has just recently appeared. When we had this recent outbreak just in Sydney, just recently, before the protests started. Well, they started talking about this as well, that we can't get enough of the Pfizer or this or that, and actually so mixing and matching.
We have,
as a priority, get it out. So there was just, what was it? I think yesterday or the day before, where the recommendation came through. I think it's earlier in Canada. That happened earlier in Canada, but we've just pretty much jumped. Well, New South Wales has jumped on that bandwagon. I don't know about the other states. They haven't actually said this, the other states, but New South Wales has. So one state has. The federal government hasn't made it clear. This is a recommendation from some experts, but at the same time, the only state that's actually jumped on that bandwagon has been New South Wales because of their bigger outbreak. But I don't think that the other states are very far behind either. Once one jumps on the bandwagon, the other ones, they're already squabbling amongst themselves and saying, no, we should have more of this and you should have less. And, so there's a lot of squabbling at the moment. And I think that's where it's coming from, because the other states are going, oh, hold on, you've got your quota. You're not going to take our quota. And so typical state rivalries. And so that's where I think the recommendation came out, because I've got shitloads of AstraZeneca, but they don't have enough Pfizer and all the others. So, and in a sense, I mean, AstraZeneca has its own issues with, issues that are clotting factors and stuff like that. And people that come from Northern Europe are more probably vulnerable, because there is a larger proportion of the population that has the F5 clotting gene. I've mentioned this.
It's supposed to be an exceptionally rare reaction. According to what I see on legacy media anyway, but everybody I know seems to know somebody that's had that effect, that's had that response, and we don't even have 1 million people in the province.
Yeah, and a lot of probably in the province that I know where you come from, because it's sort of Newfoundland or whatever. It's on the east coast or whatever,
New Brunswick
or whatever it's called. That's right, okay. New Brunswick. Sorry, but you're on the east coast, which is predominantly Northern European population.
Yeah, for sure.
And that, like in Africa, you won't find this gene, but you do find it in Northern Europeans. So I think it actually comes from the Neanderthals. So because even though I've got high Neanderthal DNA myself, like a lot of other Europeans, I'm 23andMe, I've got one of the highest. So, but when I actually looked at the specific gene, I don't have that. Luckily, I've got the African version. But you will find it more dominant in Northern Europe. And that's the reason why I put it in somebody's comment, but now I don't know where anyway. I may actually find it for tonight's stream and actually show it. So, but in regards to that specific gene, the clotting factors are they're more vulnerable from Northern Europeans. There are more people with that gene, and I think it's probably come from the Neanderthals, because you don't see it in other parts. You only see it in parts of Asia where there is a crossover between Denisovans and Neanderthals, but you don't see it in the predominantly Denisovan sort of regions or in Africa. So I suspect it's probably come from the Neanderthals.
The AstraZeneca vaccine and the clotting is something that's, I don't know, it's discouraging to me, I guess, to see how that has been narrativized as just rare condition that's only based on, I don't know. I've heard some pretty compelling arguments that it's a mechanistic necessity of how that shot works, that it will produce some degree of a clotting response.
Look,
because it's full of spike protein that does not remain localized to the injection site like they thought. Goes throughout the body, gets caught up in all of your tiny, tiny, tiny little capillaries, and causes damage. Damages the endothelium, which your body responds to by releasing platelets, whose job it is to repair the endothelium.
Precisely.
And they get caught and damaged by the spike proteins as well, and it's going to result in a clot.
But the actual COVID itself also causes clotting.
Mm.
A lot of virus. It's not only COVID, but a lot of viruses actually cause, once they get endemically through the body, they do because of the immune response. There is a lot of clotting that actually happens, and certain populations are more vulnerable to it. So that's nothing new. As I said, the only two will be this Indian one, which is localized because it's a traditional. It won't go anywhere else. The other one is a Novavax. So again, that doesn't that can't get into cells to replicate. So that just stays in the localized area. Now, there is an issue with all these, with any vaccine, even the traditional vaccines, that is if the physician or the nurse administering the thing actually hits, doesn't actually put into a muscle tissue, but actually gets into a blood vessel, and releases some of it in that. But remember, it's so little, it still will basically, first of all, it won't get into the cells to basically be able to replicate or whatever. And usually the immune system will attack it in that localized area, won't spread too far. That's why you get a lot of pain when you have a localized flu vax. Whoever's had a flu vax in the past knows you get a severe pain at that location because the immune system just rushes in and actually attacks that location immediately. That's the whole purpose of the immune system. It's to get in and rapidly basically prevent something from spreading. That's the whole purpose of it. Now, why would the mRNA ones or these other ones like Moderna, Pfizer, why do they spread all over the world? Because they're actually in lipid nanoparticles. The immune system, they circumvent the immune system. That was how they were designed to get to connect to receptors on cancer cells to get in without the immune system taking them out. Because if the immune system took them out, they couldn't do the job of getting inside the cancer cell to poison the cancer cell. Mm-hmm. That was the whole purpose of it. So it's designed to evade the immune system. So it goes around, then gets into the cell, uses the replication systems of the cell the same way that the actual virus does, and replicates a whole lot of spikes. Where the virus actually replicates itself, this one replicates a whole lot of spikes, and then they go all over the place. So it doesn't surprise me that this is happening, because the virus does the same thing, causes clotting factors and severe autoimmune. And then again, how bad you respond to even the jab or the virus also comes down to your vitamin D status again. So even people, if they want to avoid long COVID, you still need to have a good vitamin D status. So fundamentally, a good functioning immune system because of vitamin D will basically mean that you will not get long COVID, whether you get that or long COVID symptoms from some of these other ones. The problem is that they do bind in cells inside, and they can continue replicating for quite a while, creating a lot of issues. Mm-hmm. And we don't know whether they actually get whether in some people that may have some genetic susceptibility, they could be incorporated, because we know some of our junk DNA, we know viruses in the part of incorporated. So that's what I mean. 5 to 7 years to know, is it doing something like that? That's speculation. Sometimes, because he's got that high functioning autism, he sort of makes a pronouncement. I go, no. I always pull him back and say, no, it's speculation, isn't it? Yeah. And he confirms it. Yes, exactly. It is speculation, but it is a risk. I can't deny that it isn't a risk, but it's speculation. Why take the fucking risk? I can't prove it, but because we don't have 5 to 7 year studies. So how can I prove it? But is it a risk? Has it happened before with other stuff of similar nature? Yes. So do I know whether the same thing will happen in this case? Maybe, maybe not. But we don't have the amount. Do you want to take the risk? Go for it. But I don't. So, and that's not being either controversial or basically conspiratorial, whatever. It's basically saying there is a risk factor, because we know that does happen with other viruses. Yes. If we look at our own junk DNA, we've seen there is a percentage of viral code in there. It didn't get there accidentally. So do we want to be taking these risks with these sort of technologies, these new experimental technologies, which we've never used in basically vaccines in the past? It's only been used in the oncology field with poor results and a lot of side effects.
Well, Harry, on that note, I think I'm going to head to bed. Popped in here. I've been here for about an hour. But that's a good note to end it on, though, because that pretty much summarizes my entire opinion on this whole thing, is that if you want to take the risk, go for it. I don't. And then I would add on, me neither. So please leave me alone.
Exactly.
Indeed. Yes.
Precisely. I don't want to take the risk. I want to be free. I've got my vitamin D and I'm going to take my own chances. I don't need somebody else to tell me what to do, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Well,
and
everybody says
I would prefer basically the vitamin D approach, because there is no 5 to 7 year studies for any of them. So I'd prefer that. Take my own chances with vitamin D. And I don't want to basically be told that I need like a vaccine passport to fly overseas or go anywhere.
Well,
but as I said, if I'm forced because of my circumstances, I'm going to try and get the least risque type, go down the least risque approach in that regard. And that's all when I've talked about Novavax or this new Indian one or whatever, I've only talked in those terms, in terms of risk mitigation. And that is a personal decision everyone needs to make for their own self. I can't make that decision for you or recommend anything. And neither can those charlatans. And neither should government, because they don't have.
Have you seen the beautiful new signs that they've added to a couple of Canadian airports? Just put it in the private chat. There's a picture of it in that article. And I think that tells you everything about the future of Vaxports.
Okay. Wonderful. This world having a weird place to live in.
It seems like some science fiction bullshit.
It does. Vancouver
Toronto
Airport separating arriving passengers based on vax status. Unvaccinated, fully vaccinated. God almighty. Yep. Brave new world.
Yep. So there's the future, everyone. And your only hope of not being, sleptwalk into oblivion, as it were.
The funny thing is
non-compliance.
Look how close the two groups are.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's no, there's no proper separation here, like, a proper quarantine separation, is there? Haven't these people been on the same plane as the others? What's the difference? They're going to be exposed to the same air circulating.
Yeah, but they're the undesirables, though, Harry. So they have to be separated.
Precisely. This is the sort of thing. It's basically saying, you're a baddie, you're a goodie. We're going to basically, when you come through, we're going to give you a hard time. We're not going to give them a hard time.
Yep.
That's
right. And we want to identify you as being a baddie. You're the bad one. You're the one that's actually the bad spreader.
That's right. But the separation of groups, it's not fair to draw parallels to events like the Holocaust, because you can just get the vaccine, Harry. You can't just renounce your faith like in World War II Germany. But you can get the vaccine, and then you can just not be in that group anymore.
So I'm going to get
stop being so
vaccine.
Stubborn.
Am I going to get the vaccine star for being,
right?
The COVID star? Yes. Are they going to be dishing out that sort of stuff in Canada from now on?
I fully expect them to. We'll see.
There you go. And you'll probably be required to have an identifying thing on your vehicle as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're already forcing you to present papers. So,
really?
You know how things were. Well, you know how things were in East Germany in like the 70s.
Yeah. Internal
pretty good, right? So why don't we give it a shot?
Yep, exactly. Let's control your movements from birth to death, and any movement through this actual world. We'll tell you whether you're allowed to come in or go out of any other place. France not allowing unvaccinated people to vote. What? That is.
Oh, I didn't hear that. Yeah, that's
God almighty.
Well, the counter argument to this is that as an unvaccinated individual, I'm going to be taxed less, right? Because I don't have the same service accesses. So obviously I shouldn't be expected to pay into those services as much, right?
That's true. But
right?
You are.
Yeah. Anyway.
Hey. Bigots are not excluded, they've actually said. they will extract as much out of you. On the opposite, you are a concern to them and you are a super spreader. You need to be controlled and regulated.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I'm going to go to bed.
Yeah, me too, Shell. I think we're all basically up to, frustrated with all this bullshit and had enough of it.
Yep.
Yeah, this super spreader needs to sleep here.
Have a good night, guys.
See,
everyone always says stay safe, and nobody says stay free, and those two things are antithetical to each other. Exactly. So I'll just leave on stay free.
Yes.
Sure.
Likewise. Yes. Stay free, mate. See you.
Have a good night.
Good to have you here.
Bye-bye.
It's us too. Now that that Canadian sort of bigot has left.
It was nice to see him once again.
Yeah, it was exactly. Bunch of countries aren't allowing entry of people who have been vaccinated by AstraZeneca. What? Oh, God. It's freaking crazy. Still waiting for Novavax, yes. Second half of this year, whenever it happens in Australia, Australian government, their inefficiencies and their squabbling amongst the states. About other countries, I've got no idea what. Probably in the US, it'll actually be delivered a bit faster, I suspect. But Australia's still. I've checked the Australian website. I've seen nothing to indicate exactly a date, a specific. They'll just say, "Oh, the second half of 2021." Well, thank you. Can you please provide us with an actual date? So. But I will be investigating that Indian one as well. That seems very interesting as well. That's pretty good. The Novavax probably's got one advantage is compared to some of the older vaccines, it does better with the new Delta strain. So it has like a higher, even compared to Pfizer, which was 95%, this is 96%. So it actually has a higher level. So, and because it's the main becoming the dominant one, it's probably going to be one hell of a lot safer than all the others. And if you're trying to get a travel passport, it's going to be probably the easiest one and safest one to get it with. As I said, we shouldn't have to be going down this path. We shouldn't have to be taking anything that hasn't been tested for 5 to 7 years. That's the reality. But the problem is the way governments have made it, they've made it very hard. But at least these ones, neither the Novavax or the Indian one, they are localized. They have small amounts of material. It's minuscule, the material. And that material, even if it was to spread a bit, at the end of it, the immune system is going to jump on it. It doesn't go into cells. It doesn't circumvent. It's not inside a nanoparticle. It's rafted to a very small one, like a liposome, but it's not basically inside. And so it's really not an issue. It's not circumventing and getting into cells or anything like that. So it can't, and also because of the proline sort of binders, even if it touches onto the actual ACE receptor, it can't enter it, and it can't bind to any other tissue anyway. So at the end of the day, the immune system takes it out. So even if it was to get into the bloodstream, a bit of it, it's not an issue. The immune system will take it out before doing it, and it can't do anything. Can't replicate. It can't go into a cell to replicate and create anything. It's very much a localized thing. You'll feel, and that's another reason why people say when they've taken like Moderna and Pfizer and stuff like that, they never felt a lot of pain or anything like that. The reason for that is because most of it's circumvented the immune system, and it's moving around, getting into, because it's in those lipid nanoparticles and getting into the cells, creating the spikes, and then the spikes are creating then the immune response inside. But when you have a traditional vaccine, you should get pain. That's how you know that you've had a traditional vaccine. You get a pain in the localized area because the immune system jumps on that location. And so I always recommend people, if you're a left hand or right hand, have the opposite arm vaccinate or injected for that reason, because you're going to be using the other hand all day for purposes. So that's the only things. I've been advised to avoid vaccines because I have autoimmune problems. My innate immune system is overactive and the adaptive immune system is not working well. What is your vitamin D status? If you actually fixed your vitamin D status, most autoimmunity is related to vitamin D. So if you fix vitamin D status, usually things normalize, unless there is a specific genetic thing that's driving some sort of interleukins and interacting with some sort of other substance. That's the only time you may have some issues. But generally speaking, the more sun, the greater the improvement in autoimmunity. Usually, most people, when they get a good vitamin D status and a species-appropriate diet, their autoimmunity goes away completely. So you don't find it in tribal people that are on a species-appropriate diet in the sun. So it is a vitamin D. Vitamin D, you can go on Google at PubMed, which is the National Institute of Health website, and you will basically get thousands, not just hundreds, thousands and thousands of studies showing, vitamin D and autoimmunity. Highly correlated, statistically significant in most of these studies. The only ones that don't show significant statistical relationships between the two are the ones where they've used low doses. And I usually discard those because they're low doses, like 1,000 IUs or less. It's too low. It's enough for rickets, but not enough to deal with autoimmunity. But when you have high doses of vitamin D and autoimmunity, the studies show a very strong statistical correlation between the two. And the clinical studies are even better. So when they're doing high doses, so basically check your vitamin D status. I would say very important for even if you're doing, as I said, even if you're doing any vaccine, as I said before, pointed out, your vitamin D status is important. To regulate proper immune response and proper function of the immune system. So it is critical. I can't stress it enough. I sound like a broken record when it comes to basically to vitamin D, but yes, it's extremely important in that regard. Vaxxers and COVID is a decoy of government submission to about everything. Well, they're using it. I don't think. Well, COVID is basically a real disease, a real virus, but it's being used, like a lot of things, by governments. They've always used to basically try to undermine freedoms. Nothing new. They've done it before with other things. So, and they'll do it again. It's the politicians are power hungry, and their masters, the elites who they serve, are even more power hungry and want a submissive, kibble-eating population. You can actually see some of these rich people are out there actually talking about this and actually saying that they're actually saying by 2030 we should, or 35, we should eliminate all animal foods from,
Wow.
Yeah, we've got alternatives. This is what they're getting on there. A number of these people are actually pushing this line really hard. So, yeah. So it's the reality. Saying COVID machine worldwide falling apart. I don't know enough about what people are litigating about and stuff like that. FAPNATO, haven't looked into the litigation side or long COVID symptoms or stuff like that. I know about what some medicos are doing, some sort of, let's say, medicos which also exist within our community, which haven't gone down the bullshit line and actually are looking at using ivermectin, using vitamin D and a whole lot of other things and species-appropriate diet to improve people's health. And also, but about litigation stuff that some people may be doing, I don't know about it. I haven't looked into it. I wouldn't be surprised, but, there's probably going to be more in the future. that's definitely going to be more of this sort of stuff. The goal is the fourth industrial revolution. It's all about getting that genomics info. Yes, nothing like the fourth industrial revolution. Look, there's nothing wrong with technology. I mean, I come from an IT background. I mean, I'm in mapping, but it's the misuse. All technologies, if you go back, have got a dual purpose, dual use. They can be used to improve things and do things and stuff like that. They also can be used to kill people, like we've seen in warfare and other things, and also being misused to create products that, are harmful to humans. A lot of the processed food industry was actually not created by the fourth industrial revolution, but the previous industrial revolution created a lot of the modern food garbage of seed oils and refined sugars. So, all they're going to be doing this is just making more junk, in a package. So when we go to our supermarket, HG, there's even going to be less real food. There's going to be more, you'll have less aisles. Already now the outer perimeter of the supermarket is the only place you can actually find any real food. Anything inside is all packaged, is basically, it's garbage, highly refined, high in deuterium, It's just a reality. Because when you refine things, you are taking a lot of the water, and generally, if you a plant beyond the fruit, where you got a concentration in the fruit, you got a concentration of basically deuterium. In the rest of the plant, it's actually low deuterium. The water part, the content. In a steak, the water component is the lower deuterium, okay? Because all animals and most plants, beyond where they concentrate it in the fruit, the deuterium, but they get it out of the rest of the actual and what do you think people like the Hansa that go around and actually get all these leaves, or the Sambora, the Bushmen, do the same thing? That's all because it's UV affected. The photosynthetic effect actually knocks out the actual, it changes the heavy water to this lighter water, which is what deuterium depletion is. And as a consequence of that, they're actually getting low deuterium water. But when you remove the water out of something, you're actually concentrating deuterium. That's why in a protein powder where you've removed everything and you refined it and isolated, created a protein isolate, you've actually eliminated all the actual low deuterium. So in a steak, as an example, there is some deuterium, but there's a lot of low deuterium water part of it, because you only get 25% is basically the actual protein part, which tends to have slightly more deuterium. But you get a lot of water in there. So real food basically will give you, and that will balance out and bring it below 130, way below 130, especially if it's pork, even lower, because it's a very low deuterium. And your body naturally, UV also reduces deuterium, but also your body naturally deteriorates, reduces, as long as it doesn't get an overload where it can't manage the overload. The overload's the problem. The body can deuterium deplete, but at a certain rate, there's a rate limiting. The enzymes can only work so fast. If you give them too much, you overload them, they can't do it. And that's when you get mitochondrial damage, too much coming through where it can't be removed. So all those stages of dehydrogenase, you see all those in the Krebs cycle, in all the glycolysis and lipolysis, all that. What do you think it is? It's stripping off those hydrogens bonds off the carbon backbone. That's what it's doing. That's what dehydrogenation is. And it's creating metabolic water, and it's removing also, if it's the amount of deuterium there, it's trying to get rid of that out of the system and replace it with, low deuterium, like with non-deuterium type, isotopes. So that's what it's basically doing. So, but what happens is a lot of us think, oh yeah, I can get a concentrate. A lot of bodybuilders use a lot of these concentrates. and they use a massive of that because they can actually get more in. But as I pointed out, it's the leucine content that's most important, not the other proteins. And if you're going to get more leucine, you'll get it from eating a lot of more food, because the leucine content, in most supplements, is actually not as high. And that's deliberate because they want you to buy a brain channel amino acid. They want you to buy, all these other, supplements. So there's reasons for that in that regard. But they're all refined. So at the end of the day, as I've said, you really need to be really eating real food to get leucine. High protein. You'll actually, even in those studies, the high protein also had more muscle protein synthesis. That was just to show that it's not insulin driving it. It's basically leucine. Leucine is driving muscle protein synthesis. And even in the fastest state, leucine is driving it. So it's always been leucine. And when you eat, this is why people can just sit around on a carnivore diet and become more muscular without exercising. They're not going to become as muscular as somebody who exercises, but they'll still become more muscular than what they were. The more animal foods, more meat they eat, the more muscular they become automatically because of the extra leucine they're taking in and driving muscle protein synthesis. Also, they're getting more taurine in the real food. And taurine is an amino transporter, so it brings more in. So that's the reason why the vegan diets and all that are deficient in protein, because they also are very low in leucine and very low in taurine. So they can't transport as much in of the aminos, let alone the way they're bound, and they're not properly balanced is a problem. But at the same time, there's that issue as well. Yep, pretty much. If people have health problem in the future due to the jab, they'll find a way to blame it on something else. That's definitely true. Because once you've actually had a couple of years down, it's like the seed oils that caused a lot of the problems, seed oils and refined sugars. Yes. What do they blame? The meat. Even though we've been eating it for thousands of years, for millions of years. So that's a guarantee, Devox, just a standard. And there will be some doctors out there that will say, no, that have done good research, and they'll be ignored. Because there's plenty of doctors that have done good research on a lot of things, like they've done proper randomized controlled studies on meat and all these things, and shown quite clearly it's beneficial, not detrimental, but they're completely ignored. And what have all the authorities, the experts use? Junk science, epidemiology, poorly controlled research. It's not even research; it's just junk. Something that is basically so poorly constructed and undertaken is junk, as far as I'm concerned. There's no control on the data, and adjusting the data is basically fabrication. So it's just simple as that. Unfortunately, the reality. Got stuck on a menu. I open up a menu and it's just stuck. Oh God!
Amateur hour.
Yes.
Harry, I think I need to get going.
Yep. Yeah, I know. It's late for you. You need to get to sleep. Thanks for being here, Lukey. Thanks for the entertaining, images and all that sort of. We all enjoy that sort of stuff. It's crazy what's happening in this world, continuously going to the lunatic asylum. The way these things are with Toronto, fully unvaccinated airports, and
it's crazy. I'm not so sure what is going to happen down the line. And my company has been saying that they want to get back to office work in like 2 months or something, but I don't know. It's like it feels like a pig and the carrot situation. It's like, oh, things are going to get back to normal soon. Soon, like when is soon?
Exactly.
No one knows.
Yeah, it's a crazy situation currently. It's, I don't know. As I said to people, I can't tell you or advise you how to live your life or what to do. I can only tell you what I'm doing, and I can tell you how I view things, because it's my personal opinion. It's not medical advice. It's not anything else. I can only demonstrate some of the science that I back up my arguments. So I can refer, and I've shown you guys the science about vitamin D, about the studies that they did in Spain and stuff like that, in other, videos that I've done on COVID. My first one, way back in the beginning, was on vitamin D, the importance of it is a respiratory. The moment I knew it was a coronavirus, I knew it was like the flu. The flu is of coronavirus. They are part of the same. They're different, slightly different, but they are part of a similar family. They're called coronaviruses. So SARS-2, which is what really the proper name it should have been, it's just more popular to call it COVID or Corona because it's just basically one of those catchy, but it's incorrect. The reality is the flu is a coronavirus as well. It's called SARS-2. That's what it really is. It's very closely related to SARS-1. It's just a different type of mutation that's actually taken place and altered, and it's easier to spread compared to the original one, which was very hard to spread. And now the Delta strain is even easier to spread compared to the previous two. But and they even found people that had been infected with SARS-1 and survived. They actually had sort of a high level of innate immunity towards SARS-2 as well. So because that's the similarity. It doesn't mutate as much. That's why it took so long to get to a Delta strain. But at the same time, if you take a look at some of the research, even in China that was done, vitamin D was also shown with SARS-1 to be very effective in research, not only in China, but also outside of China, where some people investigated it. So it's a coronavirus. Why wouldn't it be? I mean, the flu, you get protected from the flu again and any other coronaviruses with vitamin D, because let's not forget, all the actual regulating enzymes inside the lungs are primarily vitamin D regulated. So, it's usually the cytokine storm and the damage to the lungs that actually kills you. So if you've got vitamin D as the main regulating substance that works with the actual enzymes that regulate collagen inside the actual lungs, why would it surprise people that, you would get damaged lungs from low vitamin D status or from any exposure to any corona or respiratory type infection? Any type of respiratory infection, if you take a look at the literature when it comes to respiratory infections and vitamin D, they match perfectly. There's thousands of research out there about a lot of things, even about pneumonia and all sorts of things. Vitamin D is critical. And that's why I pointed that out from the beginning, because I knew the research on vitamin D and respiratory infections of all sorts. So, and again, also with autoimmunity, like yourself, I've helped you out with the autoimmunity side that you suffered with the vitamin D, and your life has turned. It takes time to get the vitamin D status up. It takes time. It's not. It doesn't happen overnight. But eventually, if you eat a species-appropriate diet that supports, because vitamin D requires cholesterol. So if you're not eating a species-appropriate diet, you're not getting enough. Because your body is still fighting a whole lot of things, and so is taxing. So even though you produce a lot of the cholesterol, you're still going to be using a lot of it, and you may end up with very low cholesterol. So you've got to eat something to support the additional requirements that you may have. And if you're trying to correct a severe vitamin D deficiency, you basically need more cholesterol than somebody that doesn't have a vitamin D deficiency, because you need to build up enough of the stuff that needs to be created. So it's a critical thing. So yeah, I know I sound like a broken record, but I keep on reminding people that cholesterol and the sun, or supplementation if you don't have sun, is critical, synergistically required to basically produce more of the stuff that will protect you from these respiratory infections. I cannot stress it any more than that. So make sure you get your vitamin D status up. If you're not sure what it is, go and get yourself tested.
Yes.
I think in some countries they've actually got like kits where you can actually get yourself tested. I think they
I've
actually
seen
can.
those.
You can
Yeah.
actually. You don't even have to go to a doctor. In some countries, I know in Estonia, you can actually go just off the road. Off the street, walk into and provide a sample, and the next day you can actually get a result of your vitamin D status. So they've got a really good system. I mean, that's the guy in Finland, that guy, the one that does all the
Oh,
about the fasting stuff, all those. He actually
Simland.
Simland, that's right. He actually goes over to Estonia to get those sort of on the day because you get them really quickly. So it's just walk in, do it, walk out, you get the result the next day. Perfect. That's what you want. So, but it depends on the country. But if you're concerned about your vitamin D, if you're away from the tropics and you avoid the sun or whatever, or your job's basically indoors, you don't have enough time to get outdoors, please check your status. At a minimum, I suspect if you're indoors and all that, you should be on 10,000 IUs. Simple as that, per day.
Yes.
But if you're basically you're getting out in the sun, you're getting enough sun and stuff like that, you probably don't need any. If it's autumn or spring or stuff like that, and you're still getting enough sun, you may need 5,000 IUs. If you're constantly out and you're eating cholesterol-rich foods and vitamin D-rich foods and all that, you may only need 5,000 IUs even in winter. So I tend to do vary it through those periods of the year just to make sure I've got a good status. Sometimes I may have a day where I've eaten a lot of stuff which I've taken in a lot of vitamin D from the diet. I'll have 5,000 IUs. And then the other day I'll have the 10,000 IUs. The 10,000 IUs I usually keep. I've got like a separate package, and that's for like my COVID safety sort of thing to really hit like 50,000 or 100,000 IUs for a couple of days to really just mega dose myself, get stuff in. It's not going to cause calcification. It takes months and months and months of mega dosing. It's just to basically get my status up really fast, to basically just, because you can't actually, Tasmania, I just found out, you have to go through it via a doctor to get injected with vitamin D. You can't do it like a pharmacy like in Indonesia or whatever, or buy the stuff. So, yeah, it's not possible. So I've got no option but to go that route.
Yeah.
I'm still looking to see whether I can actually get some from overseas and put it in the fridge so I can actually get injectable stuff. So I don't know whether I can get it here or not. I'm looking for a number of things like even ivermectin, but it's really hard to get stuff sent to Australia. There are too many bloody restrictions. Fucking governments drive me up the wall. What I put into my body is my fucking business, not theirs. But it's
If you could see the stories, people talk about this a lot in Bard server as well.
show you,
Like
bad girl.
people going after nootropics and stuff, like just the gymnastics they use to get that stuff. I'm like, oh god, this should be way simpler.
Yeah, look, it's a crazy damn world that we basically live in, that we have this situation. No idea, Jared. I think it's somebody said it depends on the state. You have to stick. Sorry, you have to basically contact your state health authority in the states and find out when and which types they're providing within that state. So in the US, it's state specific. So you've got to contact the state health authority. In countries like Australia here, it's the national government that actually has an authorising body for stuff and when they'll be available for the population. So it's slightly different. Even though we have a federation, it's just the states deliver it, but the federal government actually determines when it becomes available. So it's a slightly different thing. Where in the states, it's the approval is done by, but the states determine when it becomes available. So you have to check your state authority. So it's a bit different.
Well.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Well, in that note, I think I'll be leaving.
Yep. Okay. Good to hear.
And glad to be here once again. And everyone, don't forget to hit the like button. Appreciate the work this man does for you.
Thanks, mate.
And
Appreciate
yes.
it. Anyway,
I hope.
If you get up early, jump on the next one if you feel like it. That's if you feel like it. No pressure.
That's what I was going to say. Depends on how much sleep I need. But yeah.
Exactly. Anyway,
if I'm not here for the next one, see y'all later next week.
Anyway, it's always next week. Thanks for being here, Lukey. Anyway, see you, mate. Take care.
Bye bye. Thanks. You as well, Harry.
Thanks a lot. Anyway, yes, cardiologists and their statin pushing philosophy. Yes. Exactly. I have to say, bacon is one of my favourite things to eat. It is. Actually, even I did the bacon and all that, and then I was then I just basically threw just eggs on top of them and just let the eggs, I just scrambled them on top of the actual bacon, let them sort of cook and all that, and sort of lightly cooked and all that, and then that was quite nice as well. Cut it in, then salt and pepper, and then cut into it. So yes, nice way to do it. Yes, mate. Yes, nothing like bacon. The good stuff. I can see a lot of you people love bacon. That's good to hear. Regarding videos last week, I was wondering what would happen if we were able to convert vegans into vegetarians so that they could have eggs. No birds get killed and the eggs are superfood. It would definitely improve their health. I mean, that guy that was actually eating 25 eggs a day, I mean, obviously it'd be a tall order to convince vegetarians or converted vegans to eat 25 eggs a day. That still, the propaganda about cholesterol is still high in their mind. So that would be it would take a while before they could actually dislodge out of that. But definitely would improve them quite a bit. There would be, you're getting, beyond choline, you're getting a lot of selenium, which is very important for glutathione. You're getting a whole lot of other nutrients in there that are quite important. Very high quality amino acids and high utilization compared to any other source. So in general terms, they would do far better, but it depends on how many eggs they consumed. if they're only having 1 or 2 eggs, it's not going to make much of a difference. You really need to be eating at least 12 eggs if you're not really getting much from anything else, because 12, that's giving you about 75.6% grams of protein, nearly 76 grams of protein, high quality protein. So you need at least for good quality animal protein. So at least 12 eggs a day would have to be the requirement for somebody to really get any good benefit in that regard. Yeah. But then you've got the cholesterol thing playing in their head, the propaganda. That's where that difficulty is to get them to that level. It's a difficult one. It's a difficult. If you've got relatives, lamps, or friends, or people like that, it's a really hard one. If you can get them to consume some eggs, take a taurine supplement, which will basically bring more of that those aminos into the system, then a leucine supplement would also be good, because at least even some of the aminos they're getting from the plants, it would enhance the actual being pushed into the tissue, more of it. So so you'd have the taurine bringing more of the plant aminos in that much harder to get in, plus the leucine would be driving that into muscle protein synthesis, because generally, having a couple of eggs, you're not going to get enough leucine. You definitely need, under those circumstances, it's a hard one. They'd have to supplement at least a gram of choline. A gram of, choline would be a good idea, but they wouldn't need to really. If they're eating a couple of eggs, they're probably getting not enough, but they're probably getting maybe. That's an important one, but it depends. But really, I would say the leucine and the taurine would be the two ones to try and drive a bit more muscle protein synthesis for them. It's a really hard one, It's hard to make a non-species appropriate diet healthy. What you can actually do is just improve it slightly. That means you can just slightly improve it. That means where it may give them a couple of extra years of life and healthier life, a slightly longer lifespan. We're not talking about miraculous things here. And I've found it myself with people that I've talked to who I know who are vegetarians and all that. I mean, people that have got health issues, and try to convince them to basically consume a bit more of this or that to improve certain functioning of their bodies. And you can see it's sort of like I don't want to do it sort of attitude. And it's a struggle. So, and I don't like, I don't see supplements as a solution. Supplements are there when you've got some deficiencies, some damage. You may need to take them for a certain period of time. Like I've talked about all these things before: the vitamin E, the taurine, the alpha lipoic acid, all these things. I took them in the past. I don't take them now, but they were for specific reasons. I had fatty liver. I've got genetics as a susceptibility for fatty liver. I had certain things, certain problems that I had to correct, and I wanted to do it faster, so I took these things. But the problem is, at the end of the day, you need to convince them to eat more of the animal foods. That's the only thing that's going to basically protect them and keep them healthy. It's a really hard one. Eggs is a good start. It's definitely a good start. If you can get them to eat more eggs, it's a good start. If you can convince them to take a taurine supplement and a leucine supplement, that's another good start. What you need to do is look at their entire, ask them, what do you eat in a day? They love doing that anyway. They've been conditioned to think like that. And then calculate how much leucine content is in their diet, and then supplement to get to at least 3 grams. Because you need at least 3 to 4 grams, at least 3 grams to get sufficient, muscle protein synthesis. So It's not going to work any other way. So that's the sort of stuff. It's a hard one. Not easy solutions, because I've spoken to people like that, and it's usually like hitting a brick wall. And when they start getting into trouble and all that, they ask and they go, "Oh, for this thing." We've grown up in a society where we think that taking a pill can fix everything. No, species appropriate foods are what fix things. When animals eat what they've basically been adapted to eat, they get better. When they don't eat when they're eating stuff that they shouldn't be eating, they get worse. That's what we see. I mean, we've even seen it with zoo animals. When zoo animals are not eating exactly the food that they would eat in the wild, they get sick. That's why the life expectancy and lifespan of zoo animals is much lower than animals in the wild, even if you don't get eaten. But generally, if you get taken out, you get taken out pretty fast, but you're not dying slowly, declining like we do, eating species inappropriate foods, or zoo animals that are eating species inappropriate foods in many cases. So it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one. I hope I had a solution. I wish one day that I can come up with a solution that can work. I'm thinking about one, a protocol that basically is I don't want to use the word, but plant-based friendly, but something that is not going to make them severely averse. Nurse, trouble. Lamb, stop using chickens as slaves, you bigot. Nice one. Had to laugh. But yeah, it's a legitimate thing, because remember, they're pushing this propaganda in the general community. They are basically guilt tripping a lot of the woke middle class. And this is the danger, that it's going to become more prevalent, this sort of plant-based sort of approach. And it's going to be really hard to fix. There's going to be a lot of people with a lot of trouble. It's a bloody hard one in that regard. Yes, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if that, now that they got the green light, because it's safe. It can be used for anything. Max vaccinations. It's safe. Let's ignore the previous studies about all the side effects, the autoimmune and all the other side effects. Yep, let's ignore all that. Let's go full throttle. I don't think that technology is ever going to be safe, to be honest. I think there is just inherent problems with the technology. It's the way it works and the way it interacts with our immune systems that I think that always these mRNA, DNA types, viral vector are going to be a problem. I don't think they're very safe technologies. That's my personal opinion on that sort of stuff. Yes, it's very hard. It's very hard. I mean, I've had some people that are plant-based that have actually approached me. They know that I'm a carnivore, have actually approached me and asked me about taurine, asked me a couple of other things they've heard about me saying, because they want help how to dose and stuff like that to help themselves. And so those people tend to be a bit more receptive to a few other things that I suggest. Now, I don't know whether they've taken all that on board and tried, but at the end of the day, it's much harder to change their mind, and it's easier when they get into trouble that they approach. Then they will definitely approach, and then they'll ask, because they see you improving, they see you getting healthier, they see you in a much better state. They're going to go, maybe that person is doing something. What are they doing? Let me find out. They may be a bit more receptive as a consequence. It depends. It's not. Some people are just really so. Yeah. Yes. Phoenix compilation. Yes, they were here. The other two musketeers, but yes, they've gone now. Getting their beauty sleep. Yes, they probably need it. I'm kidding. I'm joking. Yes. Are you trying to say phosphatidylcholine or PC? I know what you're saying, PC. Yes, exactly. Oops. Yes, they did. They did, unfortunately. Some of them actually did so much damage that it's pretty much irreversible now. They've actually done so much harm to themselves. I mean, even people in our community have done harm. I mean, Tim Noakes did a lot of damage to his pancreas. He knows it. So, so a lot of people have done a lot of damage from carb loading or eating species inappropriate. So, yes, it's definitely the case. Yep, see ya. Yes, exactly. Good to hear. No, we should be using this sort of stuff. These people are going to be using that sort of bullshit. Let's use it against them. Let's reverse it. Identifies you're an animal. That's funny. Yep, exactly. A lot of those sort of nutraceutical stuff like that they require fat, but they tend to be better to be taken away from main meals. That's how I do it. Like in the morning, I'll use like for the Physatin. So next month it will be my last. I've got my last dose. Will be my third month. So I'll be taking. So that's the next Sunday, exactly. Just before the live stream, I'll be basically having my Physatin on the 1st of August, and that will be with cream. That's how I do it. So to get good bioavailability, uptake, that is. Yep. So yes. Oops. Just lost my spot. Clicked on the side there, threw it a bit. I feel bad for Aussies. It sounds dystopian there, but it's a kind of dystopian, creepy everywhere. Yeah, unfortunately. It is. It hasn't really felt that bad for me in Tassie. In Tasmania, in the south, we had right at the beginning a bit of an outbreak in the northwest. They sealed off the place. There was a clamp down there. And again, it was out of a hospital. And it was basically stopped. It didn't go any further. And then we started working from home at the time. And then now I'm back at work. And we haven't had any lockdowns whatsoever. So I haven't been affected by one lockdown. Where I'm prevented is from going overseas. That's the only thing. But in other states, it's been a problem. And my uncle, everybody knows about my uncle, had with his eye thing issue. And he's been in the hospital because there is a bit of damage there, and it's not going to be reversible in the short term. It could be reinfected, which puts him at risk again. So they have to do surgical, but the slightly better surgical experienced physicians exist on the mainland in New South Wales, in Sydney. So my cousin actually, she's been talking with her dad and all that, but it's the problem, if they go over there now, which they need to travel to go and actually have this intervention, they could be locked down for months potentially if it takes, and not allowed back in Tasmania. So what do they do then? It's a problem. And my uncle likes his garden. He likes to be able to go to the Greek community. He likes to interact. Being locked in a home in Sydney would be really depressing for him. It's like it's a difficult situation. What do you do? On the one hand, you don't want to lose your eyesight. On the other hand, it's a shit situation. This whole situation is a shit situation for a lot of people. It's difficult. And I've just, all I can do is provide sympathy and support, but I can't get involved because you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Yeah, I'm sort of like that as well, Lamps. I'm optimistic by nature, but I'm a bit pessimistic about the immediate future, or until people start waking up a bit. So, but my nature is to be optimistic, not to basically surrender to, you can basically give up, but the reality is that's a coward's way out. So, not that I understand some people have psychological reasons or whatever. I'm not calling them cowards, but I generally think that you need to stand up. You need to be confident in yourself. You need to basically be optimistic that things can have the potential to get better. We can't be just allowing them to drive us into depression, and to be more controllable. Yes. Drug them and keep them under control. Any potential negative effects of drinking milk with added vitamin D? I drink milk every day, so I'd like to be supplementing every day, except I'm not deficient. If you're not deficient and you're out in the sun and all that, you don't need to supplement. I don't supplement at summer. In summer, you're in northern Phoenix compilation. You're in North America, I suspect. Why you're out in the sun? You don't have, the sun is there. It's free. Why buy vitamin D when you can get it from the sun? You're eating species-appropriate foods, so you've got enough cholesterol. You can produce it. Get out in the sun, enjoy the sun. Primarily, it's just the COVID era that I started taking supplements of vitamin D. Prior to that, I just used to go out in the sun. And in winter, I used to fly to the tropics. Sometimes twice, like 2 months, not 1 month. So I used to get plenty of vitamin D and maintain a very good vitamin D status all year round. So if you got the sun, don't buy the supplement. You don't need it. Save yourself some money. Yes, we had a field hospital in Ontario and never saw a single COVID patient. I can believe that. Same thing in Australia. Very, very small amount. Very small. We had somebody coming in that got quarantined in Tassie and then ended up in hospital. Found out about it because I do know people who are in the nursing profession. So that's how we found out. But it's not a big thing. So few people. But that's also because of the some of the lockdowns and stuff like that. But we didn't need to go down that path. We could have taken a different approach, is what I'm saying. What I said earlier, that if they'd closed off the borders, done initial lockdowns, this is based on their ideology, not my idea. My ideology is to allow everybody to move around freely and encourage them to take vitamin D or give them vitamin D. That's my approach if I was running the place of Prime Minister. But I'm not. So within their own logic, which is not much, but within that own logic, the best way would have been to basically seal off the airports and all that, have quarantine centres where people are flown to, and then allowed in the general public. You wouldn't have to close down the economy or nothing. It would be a non-issue. So, yeah. Problem is, we've got a lot of business people that want to travel overseas in their jets and, tell the rest of us that we should be eating kibble and minding our carbon footprint. They want to be going in and out without basically being impeded because they're special people. What a load of bullshit. To me. Yep, exactly. Always win the day. Well, I don't blame democracy. I blame basically the poor education. We don't really have real democracy. The reality is, if you sit down with most people, most reasonable people, and actually have a discussion about anything, most people will actually agree with reasonable arguments, will come up with good ideas. That's not how the emotion is whipped up. The emotion is whipped up through mass media. So what actually wins is not emotional arguments. It's what the propaganda that's whipped up by the mass media and governments. In a direct democracy, you would all have a voice. There wouldn't be like a government propagandist. There wouldn't be a media group telling you what to believe and what to think. That's the difference. Where in a representative democracy, which is what I call elected aristocracy, is basically, that's all it is. The difference between an aristocracy and an elected aristocracy is you get a right to vote every couple of years, which aristocrat will run the show, or the political class. So that's pretty much how that works. And they then tell you and use emotion to manipulate you and use the mass media to manipulate you. That's what really happens, Andrew. In a direct democracy, those sort of people don't get away with that sort of bullshit. Because all voices are heard and reasonable voices do prevail in those sort of things. That's how city-states operated in ancient Greece without any problems. The only people that they actually kicked out of the city, they literally voted to have them cast out of the city, sent into exile, was basically people that were against the democracy, but they never were killed. Unlike the modern-day zealots of the far right and the far left, what they do is they kill their opponents. And in democracies, they imprison their opponents and mistreat them. But in modern representative sort of, you know what I mean. But in direct democracies, which is no different than a tribal council, where in a tribal society, you sat around and you dished it out. Nobody could hide or talk bullshit. That's what direct democracy, it avoids the bullshit, because somebody says something, somebody else is going to stand and say, that's bullshit. And it's bullshit for these reasons. You've got plenty of voices. So reasonable voices will prevail, but the bullshit will be exposed very early. But if you're basically, as my father would say, you're listening to the dummy box, in Greek he calls it the chazokut. Anybody that's Greek will understand what chazokut means. So it's the dumb box, which is what a TV is, the propaganda. Then basically, that is all the truth you need, apparently. So you're told to not think for yourself. You're trained when you go to school to learn a profession, told by the expert exactly what to think and what to believe and how to believe it. And then throughout the whole of your life, you work in a corporate environment, which is an authoritarian organization. There is no democracy or rights to actually have an opinion. And you're told exactly how to do your job and what to do. And that's the sort of society we really live in. Even in the Eastern Roman Empire, there was some direct democracy at the local level. It may have been the emperor, but at the end of the day, there were still local type assemblies where people, and even in the city. So it wasn't completely. And this is what the Greeks tried to do after their rebellion of independence to liberate their lands. And what happened was, other foreign governments, in particular Britain, killed the Prime Minister, assassinated the Prime Minister, and basically overthrew and imprisoned with their own local elites, the rebel leaders. So to snuff out the possibility of direct democracy. I mean, the direct democracy type of approach was that the rebel leaders wanted was to have local representation in different areas, a bit like you get in Switzerland to some extent, with a representative body, but a representative body that came directly from those local council type things. So you had local people representing those localities at a national level, and also the local people directly controlling the local what's happening at the local level. That is when you're actually empowering the population. That's more closer to the direct or the tribal council, stuff like the way we've been for millions of years as a species. Never had special experts or whatever. It's one thing to get advice from an expert, another thing to be told what to do, because a lot of experts get a lot of things wrong, and we know that. So just because they have some knowledge, it doesn't mean that the application in certain circumstances of that knowledge cannot be negative or positive. It can be either. Depends on, like dual use technology. Technology can be used with negative consequences or positive consequences, depending on how it's used. So we need to understand these sort of things, because we're deliberately manipulated to believe that we need the expert. We need basically the philosopher kings. This is what Plato's Republic was, an authoritarian state of philosopher aristocrats that told people what to believe and how to think. They knew best. That's what Socrates was promoting. Socrates was anti-democratic. He was an enemy of the people, a true enemy of the people, a true supporter of the aristocracy. And he was given the option either to be sent into exile or to take the poison and commit suicide. He wasn't killed. This is the propaganda of the elites. Oh, the mob killed Socrates. No, he was given an option. You either go, he wanted to take the suicidal approach to basically act as a martyr, but he was an anti-democratic. Even when we rebelled, we actually asked the weapons to be blessed, because it's a sin to kill. Even in the old faith, it was basically wrong. You can only kill on a battlefield in just war, as it's called. So, yes, our culture is very much in tune with those natural justice processes from antiquity. They're still there. And that's why the Greeks are very rebellious. They don't put up with this sort of bullshit, and we're in massive numbers, as I showed in my previous live streams, because they don't take that shit. But unfortunately, to this day, it's very hard, even though they are untrusting of governments. It's very hard. There have been people that have talked about direct democracy or bringing some limited direct democracy back to Greece, but it's very hard. The major parties are colluding with each other to make sure that never happens. So yes, it's a very hard thing. Probably the only country that's got a bit of that is Switzerland. That's it. You won't find it anywhere else. So, yeah, that's the reality we live in. I'm going to pull the pin, guys. I'm not going to go because it's basically 1 o'clock now. It's actually after 1 o'clock. I was just going to do a 2.5 hour thing today. So I'm going to go right to the bottom. I've probably missed quite a few of your questions. Sorry, but that's how it is. I like this one. Nice one, Chris. Good to see you, mate. With the deputy role. Not a problem, mate. Not a problem. I need a good deputy. Yes. So all I can say is that, I love you guys. You basically, you can read between the lines of bullshit, which is good. That's probably why you you are my subscribers or people that gravitate towards me for that reason. I mean, we do have our differences, but that's normal. There's nothing wrong with that. People we're not robots coming out of a production line saying the same things or brainwashed or whatever. With free thinking individuals and humans that can actually able to articulate and understand things for ourselves and freely think in that regard. Not a problem, Richard. And that's the way it is. I don't want people agreeing with me on everything, you know. I don't mind. Challenge me, as I said, you know, argue with me on certain things if I'm wrong or stuff. If I disagree and I've got good arguments, it should carry the day. It's simple as that. But as far as I'm concerned, the world out there is a bit of a crazy place at the moment, unfortunately. And we've got a lot of crackpots pushing all sorts of stuff. And as I will finish this and say, get out in the sun, eat your salted meat, and enjoy life, because, you know, we only get one life, and we better enjoy it because we don't get a second chance. So enjoy yourselves. Have a nice day. And those who are in the Australasian, from the British Isle, or from Ireland to be more precise, or actually even more west is Iceland. From Iceland to New Zealand. I will see you later today in about 5 hours. Well, slightly less than 5 hours from now. Anyway, take care. Thanks for being here, guys. Appreciate it. See you later. Bye.